Hello. Hello, hello. Before we play Zelda, I actually kind of want to watch this video that Zimbers sent to me yesterday. Or maybe I can find a shorter one. I don't know. Like, this is 50 minutes long. But I mean, this one is pretty new. So I don't know. Anyways. Ads. Bye.
Ah, the Legend of Zelda timeline. One of the most infamous timelines in all of gaming. Nintendo's fantasy franchise unfurls its tale of grand adventure across 19 mainline games that kicks off from a rather neat starting point into 3 totally separate timelines, and then sort of back again. Yeah, it's an absolute minefield of a timeline, and it's not made any simpler by the fact that Nintendo has already retconned it a handful of times in the years since it was first introduced in this beast. And with Tears of the Kingdom further expanding the timeline, what better time to dive back into the many adventures of Link, be they big or small, by land, sea or air, or just plain weird. Yay! Hey, my name's Adam and this is the complete Zelda timeline, fully explained. The Legend of Zelda's sweeping narrative kicks off with, well, nothing. A whole load of nothing, actually. Well, a whole load of nothing and the odd bit of cosmic space rain, but mostly nothing. Into this nothingness come the 3 goddesses, Din, Nehru and Furore. Din, the goddess of power, creates land, Nehru, goddess of wisdom, brings order, and Furore, the goddess of courage, breathes life into the world. And thus the land of Hyrule is born. Or the land that Hyrule will become, at least. As the 3 goddesses depart back into the heavens, they leave behind 3 shiny golden triangles, which form the Triforce, a magical artifact that's left in the care of another goddess known as Hylia. The Triforce, aside from being a very expensive looking slab of bling, actually grants wishes to those who come into contact with it. Those with just the right balance of the 3 virtues of the goddesses, power, wisdom and courage, will unlock its true potential. Those who don't fit that somewhat complex cosmic criteria will break apart the Triforce, taking a hold of the piece that best fits their personality and leaving the other 2 bits to go walkies, or something to that effect. And naturally, when you create a source of omnipotent power, there are going to be a fair few wrong-uns that want to get their hands on it. And that brings us nicely along to the very first game in our timeline. Skyward Sword sits pretty right at the very beginning of this timeline, and pretty much establishes all the key elements of the iconic legends that we'll come to know across the timeline. And all of that kicks off with a great big bloody fight for the Triforce. It's the era of the goddess Hylia, and demons are running amok, led by a malevolent demon king known as Demise. In order to protect her people from Demise, Hylia gathers them all up on a chunk of land and fires them off into the sky, which feels a little extreme, but desperate times I guess. Hylia herself stays behind and eventually defeats Demise before sealing him away. In order to finish him off for good, Hylia tries to use the Triforce herself, but because she's a goddess, she can't wield its true power. So in another desperate move, Hylia demotes herself from goddess to human, and I think you can see where this is going. Yeah, that demotion sees Hylia reborn as a human, but not any old human, Zelda. She's reborn as Zelda, and so the legend starts, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, remember that slab of land that Hylia sent off into the sky? Well, that becomes the Isle of the Goddess, which eventually twins itself with the flying island of Skyloft. With the bloody battle on the surface fresh in their memory, Skyloft develops a strong military presence, which eventually becomes the Knight Academy, effectively a small army of flying cops who protect and serve the people of the skies. And that's where our pointy-eared hero Link first comes into the story. He takes part in the Knight Academy's wing ceremony and absolutely smashes it, beating his obnoxious peer Groose to first place and the honour of performing in the ceremony of the goddess opposite Zelda. Right, aside from that great big battle at the beginning, this all sounds bloody adorable, but not for long. Entering stage left is the flamboyant demon lord Girahim. He's been unleashed by Demise to hunt down the reincarnation of Hylia, aka Zelda. Girahim scours the land before he finally tracks down Zelda to the skies, and with the help of a devastating tornado, he flings Zelda down to the depths below. And this is where the next part of the Legend of Zelda starts to take shape. You see, our blonde lad Link is told about his destiny by the head of the Knight Academy, a wise old keeper of legends called Gaepora. Gaepora, the wise old owl of a man, guides Link to finding the Goddess Sword, an ancient weapon left behind by Hylia to guide a chosen hero. How is an inanimate object guiding a grown lad, I hear none of you ask? Well, that's where the sword's spirit Fi comes into play. Effectively a blue robot sat-nav, Fi guides Link to plunge down through the impenetrable clouds separating Skyloft from the lands below. And so begins Link's quest to rescue Zelda for the very first time. Well, first time chronologically. Fortunately, Zelda has miraculously survived her fall. Her rescuer is an old woman who tells Zelda that she's the reincarnation of the goddess Hylia, and that to unlock her memories and full potential, she needs to cleanse herself in 2 temples. Zelda hastens to do just that and regains her memories in the process. All this new divine information rattling around her head triggers an epiphany. To strengthen the seal on the imprisoned Demise, she makes the executive decision to travel back in time to the sacred temple and take a nap. Not any old nap though, like a really long nap, 1,000-year long nap. But she's nearly thwarted before this plan can even get off the ground when she's attacked by Girahim at the Temple of Time. Fortunately, Link shows up just in time and holds back Girahim while Zelda and her protector, a warrior woman called Impa, escape into the past. On their way out, Impa destroys the gate and they pass through so that no one can follow them. With Zelda napping in the past, Link's work is cut out holding back the hordes of monsters in the present. To help with this, he upgrades the Goddess Sword with a source of sacred power. No one can into Girahim while Zelda and her time. Fortunately, Link shows up just in time and holds back Girahim while Zelda and her protector, a warrior woman called Impa, escape into the past. On their way out, Impa destroys the gate and they pass through so that no one can follow them. With Zelda napping in the past, Link's work is cut out holding back the hordes of monsters in the present. To help with this, he upgrades the Goddess Sword with a source of sacred power, which eventually transforms it into the iconic Master Sword. A sword so powerful it allows him to literally travel back in time to have a quick conflab with a pre-nap Zelda. Upon returning to the present, Link seeks out the fabled Triforce, and upon discovering it is deemed worthy of its power and is granted a wish. He wishes for the statue of the goddess to be returned to its original place on the surface, where it handily destroys the Demon King Demise and awakens Zelda from her long slumber. And with that, the story of Skyward Sword comes to a close. Hold up, that's not how it ends. Oh no, there's one last twist in this tale. You see, that prat Girahim is still knocking about, and he nabs Zelda and travels back in time to reawaken Demise before he gets crushed by a giant statue. Link follows in pursuit and after an epic battle, defeats both Girahim and the reawakened Demise. With the Demon King defeated once and for all, which as you'll come to see is something of a lie, his sheer evil and hatred is absorbed into the Master Sword, which effectively kickstarts the beginning of a curse. A curse that sees Link, Zelda and the literal embodiment of hatred locked into a never-ending battle between good and evil. With peace returning to the lands above and below, the Master Sword is returned to its pedestal inside the goddess statue, waiting for the next hero to emerge and fight the everlasting curse. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, but at least we've established the core elements of the Legend of Zelda franchise, so stick with me. Waiting for the next hero to... Master Sword is returned to its pedestal inside the goddess statue, waiting for the next hero to emerge and fight the everlasting curse. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, but at least we've established the core elements of the Legend of Zelda franchise, so stick with me. First things first, the surface lands from the era of Skyward Sword eventually become the Kingdom of Hyrule, the central location for most games in the franchise. Peace extends across the lands for many generations, but after a while, rumours of the power of the Triforce start to spread and chaos begins to take rule. With the Triforce at risk, its latest protector, Rauru, the Sage of Light, builds the Temple of Time supposedly over the ruins of the Seal Temple from Skyward Sword. Here he locks up the Master Sword behind the Door of Time and places the Triforce in the Temple of Light, which is sealed away in the Sacred Realm, which itself is now separated from Hyrule. Gosh, that's a lot of grandiose titles in the last couple of sentences. To summarise, the Triforce and the Sacred Realm are locked away from bad people. To further protect the Triforce, the descendants of the goddess Hylia build Hyrule Castle next door to the Temple of Time, and establish the royal family to protect it. As they're all effectively descendants of a goddess, many of them are born with special powers, and it's during this time that the tradition of naming their princesses Zelda is started.
Hi Larry. I'm good, how's it going?
The years pass by and peace extends across the lands. That is, until yet another wave of evil washes across Hyrule. I guess that curse ain't messing about. In this latest bout of terror, the people of Hyrule are saved by, of all things, a tiny little fella known as a Pickery, who brings with him a sword and a golden light. The latest flavour of the hero of men uses them to restore peace and seal the evil in a big old chest for future generations to worry about. And lo and
I have been thinking that because all of the temples in Breath of the Wild and what's it called? Tears of the Kingdom are so dang giant, like they're like the biggest temples I've ever seen, that, and because Link is so small, that this whole thing takes place in the Minish Cap world. Because like everything's so tiny. So, I don't know, that's just my opinion.
behold, that's where we pick up at the beginning of Minish Cap, the smallest of Zelda adventures. In honour of their little saviour, Hyrule holds a Pickery festival, and legends state that the Pickery will return every century. And guess what? It's been 100 years since they were last seen. The festival culminates with a sword fighting tournament and the festival, and legends state that the Pickery will return every century. And guess what? It's been 100 years since they were last seen. The festival culminates with a sword fighting tournament, and the winner of this year's tourney is a shifty looking wizard lad called Vati, who true to his appearance causes a scene by breaking open the chest full of bad before turning Princess Zelda into a stone statue. He also breaks the Pickery sword in the process to rub salt in the wound, and it turns out that the key to saving Zelda is through the magic of the sword, because we need a reason to explore Hyrule. This prompts a capless Link to seek out the tiny Pickery people, who actually call themselves the Minish, and en route he bumps into a weird little bird hat thing called Eslo. You see, it turns out Eslo is a Minish sage, who's also fallen foul of Vati, hence why he's a bird hat thing. Eslo joins forces with Link and the pair seek out the Minish, who promptly tell them that to fix the sword they'll need to seek out 4 elements around Hyrule. And long story short, Link seeks out the 4 elements, obtains some powerful new items and defeats some bosses. You know, normal Zelda Vati, however, is biding his time. In his quest to seek the fabled golden light of the Pickery, he learns of the power of the Pickery sword, and instead of being proactive about it, he's just happy for Link to do all the hard work. This all comes to a head when Link fuses the elements of the Pickery sword to create the fabled Force sword, which gives the wielder the ability to quadruple themselves. Link uses this power to see off Vati, who's busy draining the light quadruple themselves. Pickery sword.
It even has the same elements. Sort of. There's no forest people, instead there's the Gerudos. But, and then the shadow people are the Rito. That's okay. It's pretty close.
To create the fabled Force sword, which gives the wielder the ability to quadruple themselves. Link the fabled Force sword, which gives the wielder the ability to quadruple themselves.
Oh, no, they have a wind element, so the wind element is the Rito. And the forest people are replaced by the Gerudo.
Link uses this power to see off Vati, who's busy draining the light force out of Zelda, who it turns out is the keeper of the Pickery's golden light. And with Vati thwarted, the curses on Zelda and Eslo break and Hyrule is restored to its former glory. Peace in Hyrule, however, does not last long. Okay, so Vati, the crafty old bastard, reappears out of nowhere and starts terrorizing Hyrule.
Do I have my streaming stuffs? Oh, are you advertising for a graphics company? Like, do you want to make graphics? Because, I don't want graphics. But thanks for joining. Have a good day.
But yet another legendary hero, or should that be heroes plural, stand in his way when they harness the power of the Four Sword and defeat him, which seals the old wizard in the Four Sword itself. Generations pass, as they tend to do after these Zelda prologues, and surprise surprise, Vati breaks free. He kidnaps the latest incarnation of Princess Zelda and hightails it into the night. Hot on his heels are the 4 links that spring out of the titular Four Sword, and after collecting up a bunch of rupees and defeating some monsters to prove their worth, the 4 swordsmen confront Vati in his palatial den. With their strength in numbers, the links defeat Vati and Hyrule returns to peace once again. But for how long? Spoilers, not long. But for how long? Spoilers, not long. You see, following the Four Swords saga, the Kingdom of Hyrule is embroiled in a bleak civil war, which spreads death and destruction across the lands. Amongst all this carnage, a young mother flees with her baby into the Kokiri forest, where she leaves her child with the sacred Deku tree, because trees are known to be very good foster parents, naturally. The Deku tree senses great things to come from the tiny baby, he agrees, and the child grows up within the Kokiri community. A community of elf-like kids who all have companion fairies and never grow old. It's kind of like Zelda's version of Peter Pan. Meanwhile, the war eventually comes to an end when the King of Hyrule is able to unify the sparring tribes under one kingdom. One of the leaders of those tribes is a lad called Ganondorf, who swears allegiance to the king, but he should under no circumstances be trusted. This evil-looking bastard is secretly after the power of the Triforce that was last seen hidden somewhere near to Hyrule Castle. While he's keeping face with the king, Ganondorf puts into action his plan to find the 3 keys to the Sacred Realm, precious jewels dotted about Hyrule. Even the king's daughter, our latest flavour of Princess Zelda, can sense his evil. Ganondorf's treachery comes to her in a dream, and she implores her father to banish the Ginger Warlord from the kingdom. A plea that unfortunately falls on deaf ears. The other part of her pathetic dream was the emergence of a young boy and a fairy that would counter the evil of Ganondorf. Pathetic kingdom. Treachery comes to her in a dream, and she implores her deaf ears. The other part of her pathetic dream was the emergence of a young boy and a fairy that would counter the evil of Ganondorf. Cue another legendary hero in the form of that aforementioned baby, all grown up, and his pet fairy Navi. And it turns out that he's already got one of the sacred jewels. He's a keeper. The pair hatch a plan for Link to nab the remaining keys to the Sacred Realm, while Zelda keeps an eye on Ganondorf's nefarious plans before gaining access to the Triforce to beat the demon thief at his own game. And so Link hustles around Hyrule to get the last 2 keys, meeting the people of fire, the Gorons, and the people of water, the Zoras, in the process. 2 races that will crop up a fair whack across the rest of the timeline, so I just thought I'd name drop them here. Anyway, Link journeys back to Hyrule Castle, keys in hand, but as he's arriving at the gates to the keep, he's confronted by Zelda fleeing on horseback with her protector, Impa, one of the last remaining members of the Sheikah tribe, the same tribe that protected the original Zelda back in Skyward Sword. She's fleeing from Ganondorf, who's halfway through an attack on the castle, all in the name of stealing a musical instrument. But not any old musical instrument, only the titular Ocarina of Time, a magical music maker that can transport its user through space and time. Oh, and it's also a key to the Sacred Realm, which is kind of handy. With Zelda AWOL, Link sees through their original plan of opening the Sacred Realm, but this plan does not go well. You see, Ganondorf accesses the Sacred Realm too, and is able to grab the Triforce of Power. He's only able to grab that part as he's a rotten egg, and the other 2 pieces scattered to the wind at his mere whiff. Regardless, Ganondorf's invasion of the Sacred Realm turns Hyrule Castle into a literal hellscape, populated by nightmarish zombies and monsters, and a lad who will pay good money for ghosts, but ignore him. Anyway, Link, let's not forget, is still a child, and as a result is in no fit state to counter any of this. As he draws the Master Sword from its pedestal, it seals him within the Sacred Realm until he's the right age to take up his mantle as the hero of time. And so Link sleeps for 7 long years, watched over by the Sage of Light Rauru. While he's taking this prolonged nap, Zelda is forced to go into hiding to escape Ganondorf's forces, and she disguises herself as Sheik, a strapping lad of the Sheikah tribe. When Link awakes, he's greeted by Sheik, who sends him off on another epic quest, this time to break the curses on 5 temples around the land and awaken the sages that slumber within. The endgame? Lure Ganondorf into a trap and use the power of the entire contingent of sages to lock him within the Sacred Realm. And so our plucky adult hero ventures off high and low to save the sages and reunite the old gang, a gang of individuals he's actually met along his travels already. Long story short, Link unites the sages and heads back to the Temple of Time, where he has a long-awaited reunion with Zelda, where she reveals that she's in possession of the Triforce of Wisdom. This reunion does not last long though, as Ganondorf soon rocks up to crash the party, and kidnaps Zelda. Link follows in pursuit and falls right into the Dark Lord's trap. You see, Link is in possession of the Triforce of Courage, and with all 3 brought together, Ganondorf makes a play to collect the full set. Following a chaotic battle atop Hyrule Castle where Ganondorf morphs into the boar-like Ganon, Link is finally victorious. And aided by Zelda and the other sages, our heroes trap Ganondorf away in the Sacred Realm with his precious Triforce of Power. With the curtains closing on another epic adventure, peace once again extends across Hyrule. But while the people get peace, this timeline gets pure chaos. Let me explain. Right, with all the time travel shenanigans knocking about an Ocarina of Time, it kind of breaks the timeline. And I mean really breaks the timeline. From Ocarina, the chronology splits into 3 different strands, the first of which is incredibly grim. That strand follows one possible outcome where the hero of time is defeated by Ganondorf. From Ocarina of Time, it... Right. Peace, this timeline, peace is precious Triforce of Power. With the curtains closing on another epic way in the Victorious, and aided by Zelda and the other sages, our heroes trap Ganondorf away in the Sacred Realm with his precious Triforce of Power. With the curtains closing on another epic adventure, peace once again extends across Hyrule. But while the people get peace, this timeline gets pure chaos. Let me explain. Right, with all the time travel shenanigans knocking about an Ocarina of Time, it kind of breaks the timeline. And I mean really breaks the timeline. From Ocarina, the chronology splits into 3 different strands, the first of which is incredibly grim. That strand follows one possible outcome where the hero of time is defeated by Ganondorf, which sets in motion the path to A Link to the Past and the original Legend of Zelda, among others. Yeah, Nintendo came up with an actual canonical path where their central hero dies. You don't see that in Mario. The other 2 strands stem from the opposite outcome, where
Basically,
the hero of time
they put
is
all the
successful
games
in
they
the
don't
fight
care
against
about
Ganondorf. But this
in
is where
that
it gets all
timeline.
timey-wimey. The second timeline branch sees Link return in time to his childhood, and this sets in motion the path towards Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, which sees Ganondorf reincarnated to terrorize Hyrule once again. The third and last branch of the timeline is the adult era timeline, and basically sees a world in which the hero of time vanishes, largely because he sort of has, just back to his old childhood time. Instead of wiping this timeline clean, Nintendo just doubles down on the time paradoxes, and this sets in motion a path where Hyrule is flooded to protect the Triforce, which, as you can probably guess, leads to the maritime madness of the Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass, all before a new Hyrule is established on a new continent. Whew. So, moral of the story, you can't exactly mess with time travel and expect there not to be consequences, I guess.
Well, it's happening again.
Right, first the morbid
Tears of the
timeline.
Kingdom one.
So Link straight up dies during his battle with Ganondorf during the climactic events of Ocarina of Time, and this sets in motion a path where the Demon Thief gains possession of the complete Triforce. Zelda and the sages are still powerful enough to seal the Ginger Prat away in the Sacred Realm, but he takes the full might of the Triforce with him. A shaky peace descends across Hyrule as the years roll by, but fueled by dark rumours about a hidden golden power, word starts to spread about the Sacred Realm, and a fair few brave souls even try to access it, never to be seen again. You see, Ganondorf's residence in the Sacred Realm has turned it into the Dark World, a place of pure evil and malice, and this prompts the sages to seal the realm off for good. Fast forward a couple of generations and we reach the beginning of A Link to the Past. The Sacred Realm has remained untouched, but that all changes when a flashy wizard lad called Aghanim turns up, kills the king, and starts stealing the female descendants of the sages. Princess Zelda just so happens to be one of those kidnapped, and she sends out a telepathic message, guess she's got psychic powers in this timeline, which is picked up by our old mate Link
Yes,
and
right.
his uncle, who are themselves
Refreshing.
descended from the fabled Knights of Hyrule. Link saves Zelda and escorts her through the castle sewers to a sanctuary where he is then sent out on an epic quest to find the mythical Master Sword before using it to fight back against Aghanim. After proving his worth by securing the 3 mystical pendants, Link finally lays his hands on the Master Sword, which now sits in a deep, dark forest. Presumably the Temple of Time has crumbled away over the years. After zapping back and forth between Hyrule and the Sacred Realm, or Light and Dark Worlds as they're now called, Link eventually confronts the evil wizard atop a giant pyramid in the Dark World, defeating him before taking on the game's true antagonist, Ganon, the evil pig monster, who's been pulling the strings all along. Link makes short work of Ganon, takes a hold of the Triforce and wishes for peace to return to the world. And with that, we get a brief happy ending amid this timeline of doom and gloom. Peace returns to Hyrule, as does the Triforce, and even people who died at the hands of Aghanim return as well. Job's a good un, Link. Right, now we get to the bit of the timeline that, let's say, is a little bit flexible. I say flexible because Nintendo themselves have straight up shifted around the order. Back in the original Hyrule Historia, the Oracle games took place after A Link to the Past, but fast forward to the release of the Zelda Encyclopedia, and the order has changed, with Link's Awakening coming next. Nintendo announced this with all the fanfare of a footnote. Look, here it is. Anyway, Link's Awakening is next up on the timeline, and sees the very same hero from A Link to the Past shipwrecked on the shores of the mysterious Koholint Island after a training mission. And it turns out that Koholint is f***ing weird. There's a giant egg atop the central mountain and a weird sense of deja vu surrounding certain island residents that he meets. And that's because it's all a dream. Well, sort of. It turns out that Koholint has in fact been manifested by the consciousness of a windfish, and for Link to escape, he'll need to wake said windfish, destroying the island and all of its inhabitants.
So, how's about all this happens while Link is asleep during Breath of the Wild?
As a result. While he may be used to saving kingdoms, Link does not hesitate in condemning this one, and he ventures about on his merry way to collecting 8 magical instruments that will wake the windfish. And with the windfish up from his nap, Koholint shimmers away to be remembered only in Link's memories, which is quite a dark ending for such a jovial adventure. Next up, we've got the duo of Oracle games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which again features the very same Link from A Link to the Past. The Oracle games see a return for the Twin Rover Witches, a pair first introduced towards the tail end of Ocarina of Time, and who were instrumental in the upbringing of the ginger-haired delinquent Ganondorf. Their mischievous game plan? To resurrect Ganon himself through some weird culty ceremony. To this end, they infiltrate the worlds of Holodrum and Laberna, where they kidnap the titular Oracle of Seasons and Ages, Din and Nehru. Using the power of the Triforce, Link is transported to the 2 aforementioned worlds, where he defeats the lieutenants of Twin Rover to bring peace and order back to their realms. All of this is in vain, however, as Twin Rover kidnaps Zelda with a view to sacrificing her as part of their resurrection ceremony. Link disrupts the witches mid-ceremony and saves Zelda, and as a result, Twin Rover sacrifice themselves, and this brings Ganon back once again. As the ceremony was only half finished, this iteration of Ganon is something of a brainless pig, a shadow of his porky glory. Ugh, sorry about that turn of phrase. Anyway, Link defeats the gormless Ganon, which brings the Oracle games to a close. Centuries pass in the wake of the Oracle games, in which time the Triforce is split, with the Wisdom Piece remaining in the hands of the royal family, the Power Triforce returning to the steel-sealed Ganon, and the Courage Slab going AWOL, awaiting a new hero to come and find it. Enter said hero, an apprentice blacksmith handily also called Link, at the beginning of A Link Between Worlds, which is very much a spiritual sequel, as well as an actual sequel I guess, to A Link to the Past. Which means the story is pretty much a rerun of the SNES classic. That said, there is a whole load of fresh story content within A Link Between Worlds, namely the introduction of a whole new world called Lorule. Yeah, technically it's another parallel universe in the ilk of the Dark World.
Another Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Just like Link to the Past. I don't know, all this makes you think that this all happens at the same time.
But it's a little different this time. A Link Between Worlds sees an evil sorcerer known as Yuga infiltrate
I really think that Twilight Princess, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom all happen at the same time. I think that's how it works out. Any game that seems similar is happening at the same time as the ones that are seeming similar to it, in my opinion. Rather than this convoluted, oh, this came after this, I think it's happening at the same time. That's just my opinion. Because there's so many games that are so similar. Especially like this Ocarina of Time one. I definitely think, or like this Tears of the Kingdom one. I definitely think that this comes after Ocarina of Time. But it's definitely happening at a similar time. So it's like maybe thousands of years later, but it's at a similar time. So I think Ocarina of Time. I want to write this down. Let me write it down. I want like a big piece of paper. But how I think it works is, I think it is. Where's the streamer can't talk for 10 minutes, but wow. How I think it works is I think it is Skyward Sword, right? Because that's like obviously the first one. And then Ocarina of Time. And while Ocarina of Time is happening, there's also Wind Waker. And then there's some weird great conjunction where both the worlds combine. And you get Breath of the Wild / Twilight Princess / Link to the Past. And then those all combine and you get Tears of the Kingdom. That's how I think it works out. Because honestly, Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess are very similar, but they're different. But Tears of the Kingdom reminds you so freaking much of Twilight Princess and Link to the Past that I think that 3 games combined into one. 3 timelines or universes combined into one. I don't like the official Nintendo timeline. I think it's way too confusing. It doesn't make any sense. I think that it works this way instead. This is my opinion. These are the games I've played. But in my opinion, this makes way more sense. All the other ones don't matter. All the other ones are spin-offs. These are the only games that matter, in my opinion. I think that's how it works. So it starts with Skyward Sword, right? And then after Skyward Sword, so the first one is Skyward Sword. Then second one is Ocarina of Time. And at the same time that Ocarina of Time is happening, Wind Waker's happening. And then after that, the third game is Breath of the Wild. And at the same time that Breath of the Wild is happening, Twilight Princess is happening. And at the same time that one's happening, Link to the Past is happening. And then there's another great conjunction and you get Tears of the Kingdom. Yep. No, it says, there's a K. Look. K. It's just my pen isn't working. It's K. There you go. See? Yeah, that's how I think the timeline works. All the other games don't matter because I haven't played them. Well, that's not true. I actually played Breath of the, or what's it called? Minish Cap. But Minish Cap is like in its own other world. It's got Vadi, and like you don't ever see Vadi in any of the other games. So it's just a spin-off. But yeah, these are the only games that matter. Everything else is spin-offs. This is the timeline. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 games. Uh-huh. And then everything else is happening at the same time. That's the order, okay? That's the timeline order. We don't have to watch the rest of this, but it's interesting, so we can keep watching. But yeah, that's my timeline order. That's how it's been for a long time, because I don't know. I just think it's way too confusing. And then obviously, like Majora's Mask happens after Ocarina of Time, but it's like a spin-off. And Twilight Princess, I don't know why they never talk about it, but Twilight Princess obviously happens after Wind Waker. Like it just makes sense for some reason. Like it comes out after Wind Waker, but it also just feels right. No, I don't say that it doesn't exist. It's just they are spin-offs. So like how they have like Disney sequels where it's like Lilo and Stitch 2, and then they have like the Lilo and Stitch series, and it's like all this stuff that kind of feels reminiscent to the first ones, but then they say different things, so you're like, wait a second, you said this in this one and now you're saying something different in place of that, and that's confusing. And that's pretty much how the Zelda games work, is they have the same thing but ever so slightly different, and you're just like, wait a second, you already said that but now you're changing it. And it's just it kind of, it's like a campfire story, where like somebody says something happened, and then the people that were listening at that campfire story, they go and they tell the story to other people when they go camping, and then it just gets twisted and changed. So basically it's all The Legend of Zelda. It's the original one, but then people keep telling the story and they change it, and then it gets confused and the details get mixed up, or changed because people can't remember the whole story. That's how I think of it as. It's just this story that's been passed down and people have said it wrong, and so that's why there's these other games, because the details got mixed up. Yeah, I know. That's why Twilight Princess comes after Ocarina of Time. I can explain any question that you have. Any question. I can explain it with this timeline. Yep. So, like, why is Wind Waker so similar to Skyward Sword? It's because it's the same thing. It's just, it happened right after Skyward Sword. So, like, the sword that was built in Skyward Sword, millions of years later or whatever, then Hyrule got flooded, and then they had to rebuild the sword. And then, like, for Twilight Princess, like, obviously it's the hero from Ocarina of Time. Like, the shade is him, Well, it's not right after, but it's a long time after. And then, like, Link to the Past. It's very similar to Ocarina of Time, but it's its own thing. But it's super similar to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So it's happening at the same time as Breath of the Wild. And Twilight Princess is super similar to Tears of the Kingdom, but it obviously happens before Tears of the Kingdom because the kingdom is all good, like it's not broken. So that's why I think it happens at the same time as Breath of the Wild, because in Breath of the Wild, the kingdom's all broken, and in Twilight Princess, the kingdom is good, but the Twilight world is in Twilight Princess, and it's not in Breath of the Wild. So I think they're happening at the same time, and Link to the Past has both in the same game. So you could think that it's happening at the same time as Tears of the Kingdom, but Tears of the Kingdom has Ganon in a different form than Link to the Past does. So that's why I think it happens after Link to the Past. Yep. I mean, I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom, so I don't know exactly. But it just, the way that they talk about the imprisoning war in Tears of the Kingdom sounds so much like Twilight Princess, so it has to come after Twilight Princess. But the way that they talk about it is also different than how they talk about it in Skyward Sword. So that's why it can't come after. It can't be before Skyward Sword, because the sages and everything aren't established yet, like they are in Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. like I got this down. Like I know how the timeline works, and it works really good if you write it down like this. But yeah, anyways. And then like the reason why there's Koroks in Wind Waker and there's Kokiri in Ocarina of Time is because they're actually the same creature at the same time, just in two different worlds. And then the Great Conjunction happens and they get combined to one, and then they are in Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess. I think. I can't remember actually. How are the Koroks? I don't think they had Koroks in Twilight Princess actually. But they definitely had fairy people, like the little Picori creatures in Link to the Past, which happens at a similar time as the Minish Cap. Even though the Minish Cap is a spin-off. No, it's not removing them. Like I said, they're spin-offs. So... I'm not ignoring anything. But yeah, this is a much better and cohesive timeline, in my opinion. Like, look, that looks much better, rather than like, oh, let's have all these like arrows and oh, Link dies and oh, here he survives. Really confusing. You could also say something like this, like, okay, so there's Skyward Sword. And the thing is, I can't speak that much on most of these games because I haven't played most of them. But, like, you could say, like, you know, Ocarina of Time is in its own little world, and while that's happening, Majora's Mask is happening. But it's just, it gets too confusing. I think you should just focus on the ones that matter. I'm not deleting them. They still exist. They're just, like, in their own little world. So, like, there's, like, the actual universe thing, and then there's this like parallel universe that's going on where like similar things are happening, but they don't actually affect the real universe. You know what I mean? So there's, how do I describe this? There's like there's one big universe, right? I don't even know what that's called. There's a multiverse. There's one big giant multiverse, right? And in this multiverse, there's a smaller universe. But it's like underneath multiverse. So there's the multiverse, and then there's like an interverse. An inter-universe. And then in that, there's two universes. There's one where this is all happening, and then there's another one, but that one is actually outside of it. So like there's the main universe with this happening in it, and then next to it is the parallel universe where the sequels and everything are happening, and those hang out over here, and this hangs out here, and then all around that is one big circle. You know? And then in this little universe, there are two universes. Well, not two. There's actually three. Yeah. Because Ocarina of Time is in one, and right next to it is Wind Waker. And then after those two, there is three, where it's Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past. And then after that, they all combine into Tears of the Kingdom. Again, it doesn't remove the games. They are still there. I accept that they do exist in this timeline situation. It's just they're in a parallel timeline. So like, Link Between Worlds is happening at the same time as Link to the Past, but it is a parallel universe. Just like Link's Awakening is happening while Breath of the Wild Link is sleeping, and while Ocarina of Time Link is sleeping for 7 years. That's happening. It's just... Oh, and Wind Waker Link too. Whenever the hero is sleeping, Link's Awakening is going on. that's like his dream, but it's in a parallel universe, you know? It's like it's happening, but it's not, it doesn't matter to this. So it's still there. It's just, you know, doing its own thing. However, Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past are all happening at the same time. Just with multiple years difference based on where it happens in history, you know. Yeah, I think this works out pretty good. Yeah, that's the timeline. That's way better than the official one. This makes a lot more sense. So, yeah. Just saying. Okay, anyways, let's keep watching the video.
Kidnap the descendants of the sages. So far, so familiar. While out delivering a sword, Link stumbles upon Yuga mid-kidnap and, well, he witnesses the evil wizard straight up turning a poor lass into a painting. Yuga knocks Link out for his troubles and scarpers back to his home in Lorule. Link investigates further and with the help of a mysterious bunny-eared traveller named Ravio, finally tracks Yuga down only to be turned into a painting himself. Instead of living out his days as a piece of street art, Link has the power to switch between 2D and 3D at will thanks to the timely intervention of a magical bracelet given to him by Ravio. Using this newfound gimmick, Link discovers that Yuga is, surprise surprise, planning on resurrecting Ganon. But once Link digs a little deeper, it turns out that there's a whole load more at stake. After Zelda is kidnapped by Yuga and taken back to Lorule, Link follows in pursuit and discovers the tragic history of Hyrule's dark twin. You see, it turns out that Lorule had its own Triforce at one point, which was destroyed when the people of the land fought over its power. Link also meets Princess Hilda, a dark-haired...
I've never played this game, but all of this sounds so much like the world, the Twilight world and everything, the Twilight realm. And I am 100% convinced that the Twilight realm is the depths underneath Hyrule. 100%. But like obviously in the depths it's all broken because this is what happens when that world fell. Oh, I can't hear.
Track down the Triforce of Doppel. But
I don't really want to get
one more twist.
Spoilers.
It turns out that Hilda is actually playing Link. Hyrule and Hilda
I don't want
linked
spoilers. I want to play that game someday.
Right, next up on the timeline is the most inconsequential Zelda adventure to date, and I do not say that lightly. After saving Hyrule and Lorule, our victorious blacksmith hero travels far and wide, eventually finding himself in the land of Hytopia, the most fashion-conscious of all the Zelda realms. Here he takes up a job listing, asking for heroes with pointy ears and truly epic sideburns, Nintendo's words, not mine, to break a curse that an evil witch has cast on the princess. Yep, Triforce Heroes is literally a game about saving a princess from a cursed jumpsuit. Long story short, Link and a couple of look-alike lads, this is a 3-player multiplayer game after all, venture into a kingdom known as the Drablands to confront the witch responsible. They find said witch, drive her away, and Bob's your uncle, the curse is broken. They return to the incredibly vain kingdom of Hytopia, like, and the princess no longer looks like a turd, so that counts for a win, I guess.
Like the mushroom people.
Right, from the frivolity of high fashion to the decline of the entire kingdom of Hyrule. Damn, that's a tonal whiplash. Okay, before we dive into the story of the original 1986 Zelda, which sits next on our timeline, there's a little bit of backstory that we learn later on in its sequel, The Adventure of Link. In the wake of the complete Triforce returning to the royal family of Hyrule, successive generations of kings used it to retain peace and order across the kingdom. Until one of them just decided, nah, this power might go to someone's head eventually. So that king hid the Triforce of Courage away and entrusted his daughter Zelda with the Triforce of Wisdom. Unfortunately, this plan completely backfired, and it cast a spell across the land of Hyrule which eventually led to its decline. Not only that, but his prat of a son, the prince, craved the power of his father, and under the influence of an evil wizard, there's a lot of those about in this timeline, puts his sister Zelda into a long, deep sleep. Finally coming to his senses, the prince places his dormant husk of a sister in a sacred altar, and her story is passed down from generation to generation as the tragedy of Princess Zelda I. Which itself is a little bit confusing in the context of this timeline, as we've already had a handful of Zeldas, but hey ho, here we are with Zelda I. Anyway, all of this was backstory to the original 1986 Legend of Zelda, remember? So time I got back to that. Ganon is back once again. 86 Legend of Zelda, remember? So time I got back to that. Ganon is back once again, because why the hell not by this point, and the reigning Princess Zelda, not sure what number she is, splits up the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 chunks, which she hides across the land so Ganon and his minions can't get their hands on them. A young hero turns up in the devastated kingdom of Hyrule, which is now a shadow of its former glory, and he finds his way into the path of Impa, Zelda's handmaiden, who instructs him to seek out the 8 Triforce pieces so he can defeat Ganon. He does, the end. But this ending is far from happily ever after. After defeating Ganon, Link decides to stick around Hyrule and help clean up the mess that Ganon has left. And there's a lot of mess. You see, Ganon's minions are still running amok across the lands, and they organise a resurrection attempt by planning to sprinkle the blood of Link on Ganon's charred remains, which is a bonkers plan, but I'm sold. Anyway, 6 years pass, and on Link's 16th birthday, the crest of the royal family appears on the back of his hand. Side note, that little detail about Link being 16 in Adventure of Link means that the hero in the original Legend of Zelda was 10, and that fact just blows my mind. I digress. Link shows the crest to Impa, who regales the history of Hyrule to Link and tells him about the tragedy of Princess Zelda I. Now that he's come of age, Impa implores Link to search for the Triforce of Courage, in a bid to unite the complete Triforce once again and save Zelda I. She gives him an ancient scroll which eventually leads him to the Great Palace, and the resting place of the final Triforce piece. After an epic final battle with the Guardian Deity, and a shadow version of himself, Link is victorious in uniting the Triforce. He uses its power to awaken Princess Zelda I from her long nap, disrupts the attempts to resurrect Ganon, and hey ho, peace once again returns to the Kingdom of Hyrule, which brings this branch of the timeline to a close. Well, for now at least. But before Link can even think about putting his feet up with a good cuppa, it's time to rewind back to that pivotal timeline split all the way back at Ocarina of Time's conclusion. Okay, we're back at the ending of Ocarina of Time, or more specifically...
And yeah, with my timeline thing, it does kind of make it so that you can't see Majora's Mask, because, like, it does exist. Majora's Mask does exist because it's my favorite game, but it's just over here, outside the timeline. Because it takes place, obviously, after Ocarina of Time, but, like, it's also a spin-off, too, so it's like another dream of Link. You know? So yeah, I don't know. That's just my opinion. It's a really good game, but obviously it's like all a dream. This is a list. See? Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker. So how it works is it starts with Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker are happening at the same time. They combine, and then while they're combined, they also are split into Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past. And then these all combine, and then you get Tears of the Kingdom. Does that make sense? They're all happening at the same time. Or no, they're not all happening. These two are happening at the same time, and then they combine into this group of 3. Does that make sense? So they're happening at the same time, but they're also in a different order. Oh yeah, I totally like... You know, sometimes when you're writing fast, you just kind of leave letters out. Just like you make a weird S that's like a scribble. Well, I can't really squeeze some letters in there, so it's just gonna be Twite Princess. But yeah, so like obviously Majora's Mask comes after Ocarina of Time. Obviously Link to the Link Between Worlds happens after Link to the Past, but it also kind of happens at the same time too, and so it's just a little bit confusing. So that's why I think it makes a lot more sense, because of the way that the words, like the character names, change and people look the same. It makes a lot more sense to just put them in a parallel universe. Don't be lazy, I'm redefining the Zelda timeline. Okay. I think it looks fine. My pen's not working. But yeah, this is how it's been in my head since I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Zelda, as I still am. But I was really obsessed with Zelda to where I can't write with a pen, so it's just gonna be Twite spelled wrong and halfway scribbled out. It's fine. But anyways, I was obsessed, like super obsessed, and I had like lots of free time. Even though I was in sports and stuff, I still had a lot of free time to just like hang out on the computer and look up Zelda theories and stuff. And so way before the official timeline got released in a book, before that happened, I was a little baby just looking up stuff on the internet, and I was like, gosh, like this sounds so similar, and like this one sounds so similar, and I've never played this one, but it sounds awful similar to this one, and like I feel like this goes like, because there was never an order, right? But like I'm a very orderly kind of person where like I like things to be like everything has a place, you know, and like just very methodical. Even though I'm a little disorganized, my brain, like I'm like very perfectionist, where like I want things to go a certain way, and Zelda is like so convoluted and confusing, and like I love like reading series of books and like watching series of movies and stuff, and like I love the Star Wars stuff because it's like so, there's like so much, and like Harry Potter and like Lord of the Rings and stuff, there's like so much to it, and it's just so interesting. But they're all like pretty organized. Like even though Star Wars has like a bunch of different release dates and stuff, like it kind of makes sense like where things happen. But Zelda is like so everywhere, and so I was like, dude, like I need to make this make sense for my brain because it's too confusing. Like when things happen, and so I like started making up these like little, I wouldn't call them timelines because that's not what I called them. It was just like an order of like when things happened. And yeah, because I'm like a history person and I like to know like when things happened. But then like the timeline stuff started coming out, and I was like, oh, like other people are doing this too. This is really cool. But I didn't agree with anything that they were saying because it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make sense for Ocarina of Time to happen before Wind Waker. That doesn't make any sense because they're so similar. Like there's a child that finds a sword and saves the world and everything. And so obviously that happens at the same time rather than one before the other. Like it just makes more sense for it to be happening at the same time. Because they're both so similar to Skyward Sword, but they're slightly different. So they happen after Skyward Sword. And then Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess and Link to the Past, like they happen at the same time because they are so similar but slightly different. And so they need to be in the same group. If that makes sense. And then Tears of the Kingdom is so similar to all of them, but it obviously happens after them because of all the different elements that are in it that are similar, but their world is different than Tears of the Kingdom. Link to the Past is definitely the one that's the most like Tears of the Kingdom, but Tears of the Kingdom I guess Tears of the Kingdom could happen at the same time as Link to the Past, but it just makes more sense because there's like so much more story in Tears of the Kingdom. It makes more sense for Link to the Past to happen before, because you're learning so much more about the history in Tears of the Kingdom, and then Link to the Past you don't really know that much. So that's why it makes more sense that like you're learning more, because in Breath of the Wild you don't know that much, and Twilight Princess you don't know very much, and Link to the Past you don't know very much, but Tears of the Kingdom you're like learning all this stuff, and so it makes more sense for that to happen after, you know. Yeah, that's just my opinion though. But yeah. And I was a little bit confused. The way that they made Breath of the Wild, it definitely made it seem like it was the first one. But it makes a lot more sense for it to happen after Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. Because that way you still have the imprisoning war and everything, but it happens much longer ago rather than, because like why would they have the imprisoning war but then like it's the first one, you know, unless they're talking about like a really ancient thing that happened way before everything else, but that really just makes it sound like a Skyward Sword. So, and then they talk about the imprisoning war in Twilight Princess too, and so like obviously that has to happen at the same time as Breath of the Wild. And then they talk about it in Link to the Past, and it's also called Link to the Past. So Link to the Past has to happen after Skyward Sword. Yeah, anyways. That's the way it should go. This makes a lot more sense. A lot less confusing. Okay.
The first meeting between Link and Zelda, which is still the first meeting for Zelda, but technically the second for Link. Gosh, let me explain. Right, so after defeating Ganondorf, Link travels back to his childhood but retains all of his memories as an adult, chiefly that of Ganondorf's treachery. He hightails it to Zelda to tell her and shows her the Triforce of Courage on the back of his hand as proof. Zelda believes him, Ganondorf is thrown in jail, and the crisis is averted before it can all kick off in the first place. To make doubly sure that Ganondorf will never enter the Sacred Realm, Zelda entrusts Link with the Ocarina of Time and tells him to venture far away from Hyrule. Link hops on a tiny little Epona, just look at how cute she is, and journeys off into the wilderness. He travels so far he literally breaks the fabric of time and space, and haphazardly hops into an alternate dimension where he gets turned in.
Whole sagas are not deleted, as I already said. They are still existing. It's just next to the main timeline. There are two timelines. There is the main timeline, and there is the parallel timeline. They're happening at the same time. But, you know, they're like spin-offs. All of them don't make any sense. All of them have different characters and different names, and it's just really confusing. So all of those, they still exist. They're just in a mirror world, you know, a parallel universe. But they're not in the Twilight world or the Underworld or the Depths or anything, because those exist in the main timeline. They're happening in an entirely different universe within the multiverse.
Into the long dead spirit of a Deku scrub. Yeah, did I mention that Majora's Mask is weird as Anyway, Link finds himself in the land of Termina, which is a strange parallel.
I want to start over again,
and journeys off into the wilderness. He
Majora's
travels
Mask
so
is the
far
best
he
game.
literally breaks the fabric of time and space, and haphazardly hops into
See? It literally says it right there. He breaks the fabric of time and space. He's in another universe.
Alternate dimension where he gets turned into the long dead spirit of a Deku scrub. Yeah, did I mention that Majora's Mask is weird as Anyway, Link finds himself in the land of Termina, which is a strange parallel world of sorts to Ocarina of Time's Hyrule, featuring a whole load of characters that look vaguely familiar. Largely because it came out 2 years after Ocarina of Time and Nintendo reused a lot of the same assets, but we'll give them a pass because the game's a stone cold banger. Termina
so
is having
good.
something of a crisis of its own, and by crisis I mean the literal apocalypse is nigh. Signposted by a massive grinning moon that is about to crash down and flatten everything. After chatting to a seriously creepy mask salesman, Link learns that the world is in this situation because a powerful mask, the titular one belonging to Majora, has fallen into the hands of a rascally Skull Kid who's up to no good. And so Link ventures off around Termina to right the wrongs in the world, and there are a lot of wrongs. The fire-loving Gorons are frozen, there's a load of aliens abducting cows, and there's even a disembodied hand emerging from a toilet. Remember, I did say...
This is why I'm loving Tears of the Kingdom so much, because it's so much like Majora's Mask, where there's like it's like all side quests. Like there is a main story, but like you're so focused on the side quests, and it's so good. Breath of the Wild had some side quests, but most of them were really boring. So it's nice to like have good ones in Tears of the Kingdom. It's fun.
Majora's Mask was weird as f***. By using the Ocarina of Time, Link is able to get through all these weird little jobs by travelling back in time to see out the final 3 days in Termina's life over and over again. And he eventually fixes everything to the point where he can face the Skull Kid himself. Oh, and he also enlists the help of 4 handy giants to literally hold the moon in place, which helps. It turns out that Majora's Mask itself is causing all the carnage, and after a really odd final battle, Link defeats the mask, returns it.
I think it's really interesting too that I don't know if you guys have noticed, but on the chest of all of the ancient armor, there's a Majora's Mask. Like Rauru has it on his chest. All of the Link's armor, like let me show you. Rauru. Look, see? See? It looks just like the Majora's Mask.
To the creepy stage, and after...
Oh.
Which helps. It turns out that Majora's...
It looks just like it. It's crazy how similar. It's just the same. Yeah, and then on what's it called? It was in Breath of the Wild too, I think. No, it wasn't. Let me see. What is it called? It's not the Flamebreaker, it's a different one. It's free. I got it. Nobody's even talking about it. Am I the only person who has this armor? What is it called? Ember armor, that's what it's called. Look at this. It's the same. See? It's blurry, but it's the only picture I can find. Oh, I'm in the way, sorry. Okay, let's see. Here's a slightly better picture. Unfortunately, he's covering it with his hand, but... See, look at that. Look at these. Don't those look just like the Majora's Mask? It's not just eyes, it also has a heart-shaped face. And it's got the same markings right here on its nose that is on here. And this right here is the same. Very interesting. It's even got little triangles like Link and Rauru have. So yeah, I think that this has some meaning of some kind. So even though this is happening in a parallel universe, I do think that Majora's Mask is involved in some way or another. But you know what they say in Majora's Mask, or maybe you don't because maybe you didn't play it, but the traveling mask salesman, he got Majora's Mask from a different world. So it could have come from Ocarina of Time's world, and then he brought it over to Majora's Mask through the portal, you know?
Mask itself is causing all the carnage, and after a really odd final battle, Link defeats the mask, returns it to the creepy salesman, and is on his
make
way.
a timeline. Seriously, it's so much fun because when I was a kid, I was just so confused. Like I was like, okay, so obviously Ocarina of Time happens first, and then Majora's Mask. But then when Wind Waker came out, I was like, wait a second, this is so much like Ocarina of Time, but it's so different. And then Twilight Princess came out, and I was like, this is so much like Ocarina of Time too, but it's so different. And I was like, what order do these go in? And then I found out that there were all these other games I'd never played, like Link to the Past, and I'd never heard of the first Zelda, and I never knew about the Adventure of Link, and there's all these other games that happened like way before I was born, so I never knew about them. And I was just like, dude, what order do these go in? Because like normally they're like, you know, the first one, the second one, third one, but it's just really confusing. So because I love history and like Zelda is so much about history, I was just like, what order do these go in? And I just really wanted to like put it into a way that made sense. So yeah, I started working on it. And I was like, Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker have to happen at the same time. Like, they're just so similar. And then Twilight Princess happens after that one. But then Skyward Sword came out, and I was like, whoa, that like totally changed everything. But like obviously the way that it's laid out, it's the first one. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yep.
To a location that's likely not as delightfully weird. Meanwhile, back in Hyrule, years have passed since the events of Ocarina of Time, and our old friend Ganondorf is finally set to be executed for his crimes. He's taken to a sacred place known as the Arbiter Grounds, where he's executed.
This is honestly pretty similar anyways. Like if you, the official timeline. Official, Zelda timeline. It's pretty similar. It just, mine makes more sense because instead of saying that they happen at certain times and everything, it's just happening at the same time. Like thousands of years apart, but it's happening at the same time. Well, it's like, so they're happening at different times, but like the way that you see it as a person from the outside, it's happening at the same time. Because like you're playing it and you're like, wait, this seems familiar because it's happening at the same time for you, but for them it's totally different. Does that make sense? So you're playing it at different times because like you're a person and you can only play one game at a time. But it happens at the same time in your head, if that makes sense. So it's like reading two books at the same time. Does that make sense? Like you can't actually physically read them at the same time, but they're taking place in the same time. As much as you can, you know? Okay. Yeah, they kind of have a similar. Yeah, it's laid out pretty similar actually. I just leave out some of the games because the games are happening in a different universe. So how they have it is they have Skyward Sword at the top, and then after that is the Minish Cap, and then after that's Four Swords. I've never played Four Swords, but it is supposed to happen after the Minish Cap. I just feel like the Minish Cap and Four Swords have nothing to do with the actual story. They're both like kind of spin-offs. The only thing that the Minish Cap has anything to do with is it has the origins of the Kokiri with the Picori and the Minish. Yeah, that one happens after Wind Waker. Okay, no worries, Embers. I'm not removing games, they're still happening in a different timeline. I'm just focusing on the main timeline. So like I could write down all of the extra games on a separate piece of paper, but because I don't know what order those go in because I've never played them, then it seems like a waste of time to me. Because I'd have to like read the stories and like put it all in order and everything, and I just don't know the story and I don't really care that much about it. Because eventually someday I might play them, but yeah. Like there's a few that are obvious where it's like after Wind Waker there's Spirit Tracks, and after Link to the Past there's Link Between Worlds, and after Ocarina of Time there's Majora's Mask. But those, like, it just doesn't make any sense for me to write it down because like I don't need to. Like this is the one that matters. The main timeline is the one that matters. The separate parallel timeline happens over here. But my timeline has two. The main and the parallel. So it's like a mirror, you know? Like there's me. I'm the real person. But then there's the mirrored version of me, which is the parallel timeline. And we both exist. It's just I matter more than the mirror. You know? I know, but that's really confusing. You don't need to have three timelines. A mirror does not have three sides. There's you in the mirror. You don't need to have three. That's way too much. I think that they did that because they just don't care about the games that happen in the defeated timeline so much, so they just put all the weird ones in that one. But instead of doing that, you may as well put Majora's Mask in there too. You may as well put Four Swords in there, and Spirit Tracks, and Phantom Hourglass, because all of those are all spin-offs and are all like parallels. So they can all go in the one parallel timeline rather than all this extra stuff, you know? So how they have it is they want it to be Skyward Sword, Minish Cap, Four Swords, Ocarina of Time. And then it splits into three. And in the first one is Link to the Past, Oracle of Ages, Link's Awakening, and Seasons. Link's Awakening, Legend of Zelda, and Adventures of Link. But it's like you don't need to have those all together because it doesn't make sense. They're all different. You know, you can just put all of those in the parallel timeline and put Link to the Past in the original timeline. And then the second timeline is Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures has nothing to do with either of those two. I don't even know why it's in that timeline. So that one can, because honestly it shouldn't be there. It should be happening after Link to the Past, and it should also be happening after Four Swords. So it should go Four Swords Adventures, and then Link to the Past, in my opinion. But it doesn't really matter because they can just go in their parallel timeline anyways. No, because mine is just focusing on this. The other ones matter, but they just sit over here in the parallel place. And then the third timeline that they're saying is the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. And it just doesn't make any sense because, like, why would you have it be so complicated? Like, why not just, you know? I'm not ignoring them. They still exist. I am not ignoring them. I know that they're there. It's just, they don't matter to the main story. Because, like, pretty much what happens, so, because I feel like you're not understanding what I'm saying. Nobody ever does. Nobody gets what I'm saying, but it's fine. So basically, if you want to put all the games in the order that you think it should go, then it should be Skyward Sword, right? That's obviously the first one. The Minish Cap happens before Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. So where they put it is a good spot. So it could go Skyward Sword and then Minish Cap. Four Swords happens after, so obviously that one is after the Minish Cap. It makes sense. And then Four Swords Adventures happens after Four Swords, because, like, why would they have the same name and have the same story if they don't happen right after each other, you know? So it would go Skyward Sword, Minish Cap, Four Swords, Four Swords Adventures. Then after that, they would have Ocarina of Time, which is what they've got. At the same time Ocarina of Time is happening, Wind Waker is happening. Okay? And then after that happens, there's also Majora's Mask that happens after Ocarina of Time. And in Wind Waker's world, Phantom Hourglass and then Spirit Tracks happens right after each other. Okay? And then after all that, then there is Breath of the Wild, which is happening at the same time as Twilight Princess and Link to the Past. Okay? And then after Link to the Past is Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, Link's Awakening. No, Link's Awakening is actually just a dream. So it's happening whenever the hero is sleeping is when Link's Awakening is happening. Yeah, and then Oracle of Seasons, and then Link Between Worlds. Actually, I don't really know the story of either of them, so whenever that happens, timeline-wise, you know, like, not timeline-wise, but like history-wise, they go in the proper order. And The Legend of Zelda happens, I think, at the end, honestly. I think Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link are both at the very, very end of everything. Personally. But yeah. I'm reading it off of here and I'm making it make sense with this, since you want to have it be all on the same timeline. But it makes a lot more sense and it's a little bit less confusing if we just have all the sequels and all the parallel universes being over here and then the main story right here. Makes a lot more sense. Because it's kind of like the side quests and stuff, you know, like, so like there's Harry and Harry Potter and Star Wars and stuff. They've got like all this extra stuff that they're doing, but the main story is Harry is trying to defeat Voldemort. And like all this extra stuff where he's like hanging out with Fred and he's hanging out with Luna and he's like making friends and going to school and stuff, like all that is like extra. The main quest is Harry trying to defeat Voldemort. Just like with like Star Wars, where it's like the hero is trying to defeat the bad guy with like Luke and Leia and Obi-Wan and Anakin and the Emperor and all that stuff. Like the main thing is they're trying to just defeat the bad guy. But there's like all this other stuff with like Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian and the Han Solo and Chewbacca and all this extra stuff. And it's just like, if you just focus on the main story, it's these ones. And like the Lord of the Rings, where it's like, it's Frodo trying to go defeat the bad guy, but he's got all his friends and all these other little side quest storylines things. No, I'm making it fit for you. Because it does fit. It's just, it's more effort than you need to think about it. So like I could write it down to where it all fits. But it's like it's gonna take me a second. It's a lot easier just to write it down. And also, I don't really know the story that well of Oracle of Ages and Seasons and Link's Awakening. I mean, I know Link's Awakening is Dream, for sure. But, yeah. Let me see how this... I'll write it down for you. But it's going to take a while. No, they do matter. It's just they're doing their own thing. So, Skyward Sword's the first one. Very obvious. And then we got... Minish Cab. And while Minish Cab is happening, there's 4 swords. And then after that is 4 swords adventures. Okay. Okay, and then second, we have Ocarina of Time / Twilight Princess / The Wind Waker. Okay, and then after that, after Ocarina of Time is Majora's Mask. After Twilight Princess is nothing except for Breath of the Wild. And then after... Oh, I got this mixed up. See, this is why I don't want to do this, because it's confusing. Because Ocarina of Time and the Wind Waker are happening at the same time. Okay, start over. We got number 1, Skyward Sword. Okay? After Skyward Sword, but it doesn't really matter because it's not pertaining to the main timeline. But sure, to put it in here to make it so that you feel better, then there is the Minish Cap, which is happening. Also, they don't even talk about Triforce Heroes on here, which is obviously happening at the same time as Four Swords Adventures and the Minish Cap. Okay. Yeah, anyways. I feel like because I don't know the story, but it makes sense for it to be this way, then the Oracle of Ages and Seasons could also happen at the same time as Four Swords and Minish Cap and Triforce Heroes and all those things. Because of the way that the stories are, they're so similar, so they're happening at the same time. Because I already explained this earlier, but how I think it works is if it's a similar story, but it's slightly different, is I think of it as like a campfire story that has been passed down. So like The Legend of Zelda is, I've always thought this, but The Legend of Zelda is a story that has different characters at different times, but also a lot of the stories get mixed up. So, like Skyward Sword actually happens, and Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker actually happen, but there's a slight twist in the parallel universe thing where all of a sudden there's like Majora's Mask, where it's like, wait a second, we mixed up some of the words and the characters and the locations because the people kept, like the people of Hyrule and everything, they were telling the story and they misremembered and they changed things because it made more sense and it was more entertaining, and so the story got changed a little bit and then it got passed down wrong, and that's why, because that's what people do. And like that history, if it's not written down, if you're just saying things verbally, people make mistakes and they have bad memories, and it gets passed down wrong. It's just how it is. And because like they have pictures, but like it's like the hieroglyphics, like sure, we have a picture of a person milking a cow or whatever, but like, you know, you don't know what's going on exactly. Like maybe they're just like, I don't know, or maybe it's like I don't know, just descriptions of things are hard for me. but yeah, you don't know exactly what's happening in that hieroglyphic, and so it's just, you're just interpreting it as you would like to. But these games happen and they don't exist in the timeline as there is someone telling the story wrong. Yes. So it is a story that actually did happen, but the details are wrong. So like it's like Majora's Mask happened, but it's actually just Ocarina of Time happening, and then somebody told the story wrong, and so that's why the details are different. Okay. And yeah, and then we got 2 is Ocarina of Time. Wind Waker. And then after these 2, this one has Majora's Mask. This one has Phantom Hourglass. Spirit Tracks. Okay. Yeah. And then we got 3, which is Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past. And then after Link to the Past, I am just going straight off the timeline because I don't know the official timeline, because I don't know the story of Oracle of Ages and Seasons and Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link. Like, I know it a little bit, but not really. So I'm just thinking that, sure, why not? Maybe they're right. But after Link to the Past, you have Oracle of Ages, Oracles, and then you have what's the other one? Link Between Worlds. Okay. And then you have, after Twilight Princess is nothing, after Breath of the Wild is nothing, because both of those have in the 4th one Tears of the Kingdom. And then, yeah, at the very, very, very end, a million bajillion years later, you have The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link. Okay. So this is how it works. There you go. Oh, and Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening is happening in the dream world. Link's Awakening. Hero is asleep. So pretty much Link is one of those people where he has the same dream over and over and over again. And when he's dreaming, he dreams of Link's Awakening. Which is classic, because he's the hero. He saves the world. And of course he would dream of a time when he doesn't save the world. Because he feels guilty. That he's never gonna do a good job. So it's so classic. Poor guy. Where does the freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land fit into this? That's Tingle's dream. It doesn't even matter at all. It's not a Zelda game. It's Tingle dreaming. No, it does, because all of the races that are happening, they happen at the same time. So an Ocarina of Time, they have the same people that are in Wind Waker, just a lot of years have happened in between. But they're also happening at the same time. So like the Zora are the Rito, but they are evolved. And then the games combine, where you have the Zora and the Rito at the same time. And that's how you wind up having them in Breath of the Wild, where you have both the Rito and the Zora at the same time. I don't know. It's just the magic of Hyrule. It's like in the Dark Crystal, the Great Conjunction, where for some reason it's just coming together. I don't know why their world works that way, but it does. Like they have magic. They have these great magical triforces, and they have wind magic and fire magic. I don't know. I'm just a lowly human. I don't know how magic works. It's just that's how it is. You know? No, it's all stuff that actually happened. It's just people are talking about it and then things change because it gets confusing. Because that's what happens when you tell stories verbally. And then like the buildings and stuff, all of the buildings that are in Ocarina of Time are also in Twilight Princess. And they're at the same time they're happening in Breath of the Wild too. And they're happening in Link to the Past. But they're just those worlds' versions of them. So that's why in Twilight Princess there's like no what's it called? No Lon Lon Ranch or anything, but they have the Ox Place and everything. And that's why like the Lost Woods is always there, but it's slightly different because it's happening in a different world that is at the same time. It's like happening at the same time as the other world. So it's just kind of like, I don't know why, but for some reason Skyward Sword happens, and then Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker happen at the same time, and then they combine, and then after they combine, they split into Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past. So it's like basically there's two worlds that go together, get mixed up, and then split. I don't know how that happens, but that's what happens. Because that's the only way that it makes sense for there to be similar elements in two completely different games. Because otherwise, like, where would that have happened, you know? I am writing my own timeline because the official timeline makes no sense. I have already written this a long time ago when I was a kid. There's no like I don't know. I'm not good with magic stuff. I'm not a witch. I don't know. It's just it's a great conjunction. The worlds have come together and then smashed and broke apart into nether worlds. It's just how it is. I don't know. How was the earth created? Who freaking knows? Like, we have stories that explain it, but who knows if that actually is how it was? Nobody knows. But yeah, that's my opinion. This is how it works. And it just explains a lot of like, why the heck are Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link obviously their own two things that like are so different than everything else from before? Because that happened a really freaking long time after. I'm not a storyteller, I'm a historian. It's different. Just like I'm not a writer, I'm a historian. I just write stuff down, but I don't write. Like, I don't come up with it. I just take the things that are already written down and make sense of them. Do, 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 do. I'm not a songwriter, I'm a singer. So like I take the song and then I change it around a little bit so it makes more sense for me. Okay, anyways, yeah, this is it. It's very confusing. So if you want the simplified version, this is it. This one includes all the sequels and parallel universes. This one is the regular one. I made it work. I made it work for you. It's right here. There you go. But doesn't that look really freaking confusing? So the simplified version is this. Which is still confusing, but it makes a lot more sense than this. Yep. I'm sure that, oh, and also, I think that, because I haven't even finished the game yet, but I think that, Zelda traveling through time, because, like, from what I have gathered so far from Tears of the Kingdom, is Zelda. It's not Link's fault. It's not Link's fault at all. It's always Zelda's fault. Always. Zelda is traveling through time. Zelda, as far as I have seen, because I've only seen like a couple memories, but Zelda's talking to Rauru in the past, in like the far past, after Skyward Sword, but before Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild and Link to the Past, and probably before Ocarina of Time. It's probably pretty recently after Skyward Sword. There is the imprisoning war and everything. And I think that because all the traveled back so far, she's the one that split the world into two. So it was originally just the Skyward Sword world, but then she split it into two, where it's Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. And then when she travels back to Breath of the Wild, she splits the world into three. So that there's Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past. And then thankfully, when she finally travels back that second time, it all combines into Tears of the Kingdom. But I think what is going to happen, I think Link is going to have to go to the past to go kill Ganon in the past. This is just my theory. I don't want anyone to tell me what's happened because I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom yet. But I think what's going to happen is Link's going to go to the past and go kill Ganon in the past, and then bring Zelda back. And that's how the world goes back into one. And then very, very long time after, there is The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link. So, there is magic. It's Zelda's Sage of Time magic. And it's her magic that breaks everything. Yep. But I don't know for sure, because I haven't finished the game yet, but that's just my thoughts.
By a great big bloody sword right to the chest.
Thanks, Sam.
Only this doesn't kill him. As he's in possession of the Triforce of Power, he survives the impaling only to be banished to a never before mentioned Twilight Realm by the sages. You see, the Twilight Realm is a parallel world of sorts. There's really a lot of them knocking about in this franchise.
It's the depths!
It was created when 4 light spirits banished magic-wielding people out of Hyrule. This shadowy locale is populated by a race of people known as the Twilight.
And this makes sense too, because this is what they were talking about, like, in the depths, or they never talked about it, but the monsters, like the Yiga clan, and the bad guys that you, like, take out and stuff, they are all in the Twilight Realm, in the depths. See, my timeline works great. It makes a lot of sense.
And when Ganondorf rocks up with all his evil thoughts and plans, he inspires one of the Twilight, a wrong-un known as Zant, to invade Hyrule. This devilish duo is opposed by the titular
It's just so sad
Twilight
that the
princess,
Twilight are
a lass called
just
Midna,
gone.
who's cursed by Zant and banished to Hyrule. Zant then invades Hyrule, transforms the world into a dense land of...
But because all this is happening and Zelda has time powers, maybe she can somehow go back in time and of course break the freaking world again. But we can go save Midna.
Twilight and turns all humans into anxiety-racked spirits. And that's all just the backstory for Twilight Princess. Link hasn't even turned up yet. Speaking of Link, this time he's a wolf. You see, as Twilight spreads through the land of Hyrule, it finally reaches the outskirts.
It's just my timeline has never, or my theory has never, it's never made sense because I didn't know how strong Zelda's powers were. Because, like, she's never gone through time. Like, she's called the Sage of Time, but we've never actually seen her go through time. So, I didn't know that she was able to even do that. Until this game. And now I'm just like, whoa, this makes so much sense.
Of Link's home village. But instead of turning into a spirit, Link turns into a good boy as a result of him being a descendant of the Hero of Time and possessing the Triforce of Courage. Speaking of the Hero of Time, he actually rocks up in this game as an embittered old skeleton to dole out sword fighting tips and tricks. But I'm digressing again. So with the help of Midna, Link ventures around Hyrule, catches up with Zelda, clears the land of Twilight, finds the Master Sword and the Ruin to dole. Speaking of the Hero of Time, he is the Hero of Time and possessing the Triforce of Courage. Speaking of the Hero of Time, he actually rocks up in this game as an embittered old skeleton to dole out sword fighting tips and tricks. But I'm digressing again. So with the help of Midna, Link ventures around Hyrule, catches up with Zelda, clears the land of Twilight, finds the Master Sword.
Oh yeah, she is the descendant, or she is Hylia. That they talk about it in Skyward Sword. Zelda is Hylia as a human, but she's like not a human. She's a Hylian. Cause yeah, I think it's in Skyward Sword. I think they have round ears. No, she's got pointy ears, but I think all the people around them have round ears. But she's like the human version of a god or a goddess in her case. So she looks like a human, but then she's got her magic powers and the long ears. Yes. Yep, that's exactly how it works. Same way. That's why in Breath of the Wild, Zelda couldn't figure out her powers and everything because she had to do the trials that the original Zelda had to do.
Sword in the ruins of the Temple of Crown High sword fighting tips. He actually.
Then they don't go over that in Ocarina of Time, but I guess at some point Zelda must have done those trials when she was a Shieka, when she was like in disguise. Then she must have done the trials and everything.
Of Time and possessing the Triforce of Courage. Speaking of the Hero of Time, he actually rocks up in this game as an embittered old skeleton to dole out sword fighting tips and tricks. But I'm digressing again. So with the help of Midna, Link ventures around Hyrule, catches up with Zelda, clears the land of Twilight, finds the Master Sword in the ruins of the Temple of Time, snowboards with a Yeti, fixes a broken mirror, and eventually travels to the Twilight Realm itself to destroy Zant. But that...
See, the magic in Twilight Princess is so similar to the magic from... Wait. I'm so confused all of a sudden. Do you think that the reason why the Zonai looks so... The Zonai must be the Twilight, right? Because that would make a lot of sense. Why the Zonai looks so different than the Hylians. Hmm. Yeah, that's true. But she's a sage of time, so it makes sense that she sees the future. And that's how it always works. They always see a little bit of some kind of something. And then they go and do their trials, and then they freaking break the world. And Link has to go fix it because Zelda had some thought that like, oh, maybe we should go do this thing, and then it ruins everything, and Link has to fix it every time. It's always her fault.
It's just half the job done. With Ganondorf back in Hyrule, Link and Midna confront him in the castle's throne room, and after not one, not two, but three bouts in the ring with him, Ganondorf is finally
No, Twilight Princess doesn't have sky people. That's what's interesting. They put Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword into Breath of the Wild, and then we got Tears of the Kingdom. Because Skyward Sword is all about the sky people. Twilight Princess is all about the Twilight. And although you don't really know that much about them, but you just know that there's this underground people. But the way that they make it seem in Twilight Princess is that it's a mirror rather than underground, which is similar to how it is in Link to the Past, which is why Twilight Princess and Link to the Past happen at the same time, in my opinion. And Breath of the Wild is having it at the same time too. You just never get to see the underground until it's already all destroyed in Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten that far in Tears of the Kingdom. Oh yeah, that is true. The weird chicken people. Yeah, I forgot about that. That makes even more sense that Twilight Princess happens at the same time as Breath of the Wild. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that's true. And then how I see it is because Link to the Past has an underworld too. I think that they just didn't ever touch the sky world. I think that they only focused on the underground. They just didn't know. They didn't. And it makes sense because it's like kind of a top-down game. Like, why would you look up? Or you're just gonna keep looking down.
defeated courtesy of a good old-fashioned Master Sword to the chest. It didn't work last time, but this isn't any old sword, and he loses the Triforce of Power as a result. And with Zant and Ganondorf gone, the curse on Hyrule and Midna is lifted, and as Link turns to celebrate with her, he's shocked by the true form of the Twilight Princess standing before him. And with that, the game comes to a close when Midna says her farewells to Zelda and Link before travelling back to her own realm, and in her last act before departing, she shatters the mirror of Twilight and breaks the connection between the two worlds forever.
Not forever!
Okay, several hundred years have passed since the events of Twilight Princess, and peace has extended across the realms of Hyrule, especially in the relations between the Hylians and the Gerudo people, the tribe that Ganondorf was born into. But here's the kicker. Somehow, rather inexplicably if you ask me, Ganondorf is back. How, you may ask? Well, he's just sort of born again into the Gerudo tribe, ready and willing to tear the place up. He starts by trespassing into a forbidden pyramid to steal a mystical trident before he nabs a dark mirror, which is remarkably familiar to the one in Twilight Princess, but has absolutely nothing to do with it for, reasons. To add insult to injury, the demon thief resurrects our old pal Vati. Remember him? The old wind wizard himself kicks into life, and the evil pair kidnap Zelda and her maidens and enshroud the world of Hyrule in darkness, as is the tradition in Zelda games. Link, not wanting to suffer a bout of FOMO, draws the fabled Four Sword, which hasn't been used for millennia by this point, I guess, and he immediately quadruples himself. The quartet venture around Hyrule, fixing the light world bit by bit before defeating Vati at the top of his perilously high wind palace. As they escape the crumbling palace, they're confronted by Ganon, who's also easily vanquished. The Lynx use the Four Sword to seal the giant pig away, and with that, the ancient weapon is placed back on its pedestal, awaiting the next time Nintendo decides to make a multiplayer Zelda that's not Triforce Heroes. Right, with another timeline at an end, time to rewind time once again back to that crucial split in the chronology.
See, he even explained it too. Why Minish Cap, Four Swords, Triforce Heroes, and Four Swords Adventures all happen at the same time. Because it's a spin-off! The only one that actually matters out of those 4 or 5, however many I said, is Minish Cap. And that's just because they have the Kokiri in it. And with the Picori, whatever they call them. But yeah. Minish Cap is pretty much just like Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker and all the others. It's a spin-off too. It's just, they actually do mention the little forest people.
Okay, we're back at the great timeline split at the end of Ocarina for the last time. Promise. This branch of the chronology follows the timeline that shoots off from the events in Ocarina, where the hero of time travels back to his childhood. But instead of erasing this timeline a la Back to the Future, it just creates a whole new timeline a la Avengers Endgame. Are you still with me? I really hope you've seen those movies. Anyway, Ganondorf is sealed away as we're following on from the adult timeline ending of Ocarina of Time, and peace once again extends across Hyrule. By now, you should know that that peace will be short-lived, and lo and behold, Ganondorf is able to crawl his way out from the depths to wreak havoc once again. In the wake of the hero of time having zapped back to his childhood and gone off adventuring to Termina, etc, etc, the King of Hyrule turns to the gods for help, and they choose the desperate times, desperate measures plan of action. So they seal Hyrule and flood the whole damn world. Wow. Fortunately, the good people of Hyrule survive by travelling to the tops of the tallest mountains in the land, and in this new water world, a bit like the movie, but definitely not the movie, they emerge from the flood on isolated islands across the ocean. The king himself stays behind in the sealed castle of Hyrule, sending his daughter to the waves above to live out her life with the common folk, albeit with a piece of the Triforce of Wisdom. Years pass and Ganondorf returns like a bad penny, stirring up shit across the seas from his den at the Forsaken Fortress. He seeks out and murders 2 of the sages, and starts his search for Zelda and the Triforce of Wisdom. The king also wakes from his slumber, and his spirit takes up residence in a dashing red boat known as the King of the Red Lions. The king boat goes searching for his descendant as well as for a new hero who can take up ownership of the Triforce of Courage. The former he finds in the shoes of brash pirate leader Tetra, while the latter he finds on a charming little island. This strapping young lad, also handily known as Link, has been searching for his sister, who's been kidnapped as part of Ganondorf's enterprise to steal young girls until he finds Zelda, which is an absolutely mad plan when you stop and think too much about it. Okay, now all the major pieces are finally on the board for Wind Waker, let's break it all down. Okay, so Link and the King boat venture off across the seas to prove his worth for the Triforce of Courage. In the process, they save Link's little sister, meet the descendants of the Kokiri and the Zoras, who are now little tree sprites and dragon birds respectively, and chart a series of maps with a talking fish. After proving his courage, Link travels beneath the waves to Hyrule Castle, where he grabs the Master Sword. Little side note, but I love all the stained glass windows here that depict the battle with Ganon and the 6 sages from Ocarina of Time. It's these little moments that really sell this bonkers timeline for me. Anyway, the Master Sword is next to useless against Ganon.
And that's why it has to happen at the same time as Ocarina of Time. Just many years later. So it's like, it happened, but it's also much longer past there. I don't know how to explain it basically. It's like, it's happening after and also at the same time as Ocarina of Time. Does that make sense? So it's like Ocarina of Time happened before Wind Waker, but also at the same time as Wind Waker. Like, I don't know how to describe that, but that's basically what's happening. Right, Samurai? Yes, that's the Fire Nation's plan, yep.
Ganondorf, and Link and Tetra barely escape with their lives during their attempted attack on the Forsaken Fortress. And it's at this point that the King of Red Lions seeks to move matters along a bit, first by informing Tetra of her ancestry and uniting the Triforce of Wisdom, and secondly in directing Link to seek out the shards of the Triforce of Courage, so they can more successfully put an end to Ganondorf. And so we fast forward a bit to the section where Link has all the relevant Triforce pieces and can retake the assault to Ganondorf. A lot of things happen in a short space of time. First, as Ganondorf reaches out to take the completed Triforce, the actual king rocks up and touches it first, and wishes for the ancient land of Hyrule to be destroyed once and for all, to make way for a better future. This irks the Demon Thief somewhat, as he kinda had hopes on ruling over said land, but hey ho, unlucky Ganondorf lad. Link and Zelda kick into gear and fight off Ganondorf with a combo of light arrows and the Master Sword itself, and finally defeat the evil bastard with a sword stab to the head, which has always felt overly violent to me, especially within the context of the cutesy cel-shaded graphics.
Seriously.
Anyway, Zelda and Link escape Hyrule as it crumbles around them, and the king opts to stay behind like the captain of a sinking ship. And so the never-ending cycle of Hyrule and the Triforce finally comes to an end. Well,
like, you really have to wonder what is underneath the little pedestal. Like, is that where Ganon's head is? Like, cause yeah, especially in Breath of the Wild and Link to the Past, like, yeah.
at least in this timeline, I guess. But this story branch is far from over. So with Hyrule Kingdom finished, Link and Zelda, who's now back in the guise of Tetra, set sail in search of new lands. Their travels take them into the haunted waters of the Ghost Ship, which promptly kidnaps Tetra and throws Link overboard. He awakes on Mercy Island and befriends the wise old Oshus, his pet fairy Sealer, and the charismatic Captain Lineback. Across Link's adventures to catch the Ghost Ship, he learns that Oshus is actually the local Ocean King, who's in a long-running battle against some kind of evil squid called Bellum, and his pet fairy is actually the Spirit of Courage. Lineback is just plain old Lineback though, so nothing new there. En route, Link secures another legendary sword, fools around with time once again courtesy of the titular Phantom Hourglass, and defeats Bellum. Peace returns to the seas and Oshus turns back into his true form, which is a giant silver whale. But here's the kicker. When Link and Tetra find themselves back in their own world, only 10 minutes have passed since they left on their voyage, which is a proper ballsy Link's Awakening-esque move by Nintendo. And so after their supposedly 10-minute long adventure in Phantom Hourglass, Link and Tetra continue on with their mission to find new lands. They eventually call land ho on a new continent, which has a mysterious tower at its centre with a bunch of rail tracks stemming from it. And despite there clearly being some form of settlement here, Link and Tetra colonise this new land as the New Kingdom of Hyrule. Fast forward 100 years and weird going down in New Hyrule. The aforementioned tracks are disappearing left, right and centre, and the reigning Princess Zelda wants to know.
I want to play this someday, so I'm gonna skip it.
Wearing two...
Sorry.
Except it's not.
At least this makes sense, because this is how I have it laid out too. There's Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks, but the sequels don't really matter. Like, they are happening after Wind Waker, but they don't really matter. And then after that is Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, Link to the Past.
Here's where Nintendo kind of just stops caring about their own damn timeline. You see, Breath of the Wild wasn't initially given a placement on the overarching chronology for a good while after its release. About a year after the game launched though, Japanese publication Famitsu asked the devs the essential question of where the game sat on the already convoluted timeline. Their answer, and I quote, was, well, of course it's at the very end, but I get what you're asking, it's which timeline it's at the very end of. That's our
It is actually in the middle. It happens at the same time as Twilight Princess and Link to the Past.
up to the player's
But before Tears of the Kingdom, of course.
imagination, isn't it? Which kinda means that they just haven't figured that out yet. So let's for a moment entertain
I
this
figured
nonsense
it
and say
out.
that Breath of the
I
Wild
got
takes
it.
place at the end of all of the timelines. It still leaves a lot for the imagination, which I guess is the point according to the developers. Anyway, there's plenty of evidence of Hyrule's history across Breath of the Wild's vast map, both ancient and recent. And by ancient I mean 10,000 years ago, and by recent I mean a century ago. So basically, Breath of the Wild is potentially so very far into the future that its placement on the timeline doesn't even matter. But hey ho, let's get to the story. Most of the key narrative beats of Breath of the Wild actually take place through extensive flashbacks. During these, we learn that the Kingdom of Hyrule was once a hugely advanced civilization, and the people used this technological prowess to protect themselves from the endlessly repeating Ganon apocalypse. To this end, they built themselves 4 huge divine beasts, and a whole army of guardian robots to help them repel the advance of Ganon, which they did, yay! Until the next time Ganon reared his ugly head, that is. Not yay. Anyway, fast forward to about a century preceding...
Like Lucy.
Hello.
Looks just like
Anyway,
Miss Lucy.
fast forward to about a century preceding the events of Breath of the Wild, and we catch up with the latest incarnation of Princess Zelda and the beast piloting champions, who are gearing up for the inevitable next round with Ganon. The latest in the line of Zeldas has not been blessed with the ancient power of the goddess, and in the wake of that, she relentlessly pursues any and all means with which to hold back the oncoming Ganon storm. Unfortunately, she runs out of time before Ganon's next attack, and in the ensuing battle, her protector, a young lad called Link, is hurt, fatally wounded at the hands of the Guardians themselves, who have been possessed by Ganon. Long story short, Zelda whisks Link away to the Shrine of Resurrection, hides the fabled Master Sword, and in a completely badass move, locks herself and Ganon away in Hyrule Castle to duke it out for time immortal. Link, the poor lad, eventually wakes up fully healed a whopping 100 years later, with absolutely no memory. After
Poor
a strange
guy.
interaction with a wise old man who turns out to be the long-dead spirit of the King of Hyrule, Link ventures off on an epic quest to take back the 4 divine beasts from Ganon before taking on the foul pig himself. And after a lengthy battle, Link emerges victorious, and as he and Zelda stand over the battlefield, they look to the future to rebuild the devastated Hyrule. But that future might have to wait, as there's another destructive force that wants to end the world of Hyrule for good. Or at least that's the direction that Tears of the Kingdom seems to be going in. Ostensibly a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom
scared.
expands the world of Hyrule into the skies, possibly as a throwback to Skyward Sword right at the very beginning of this timeline. And while there isn't a whole lot of information to go on right now, that hasn't stopped people from theorising about how the last 2 games fit into the Zelda timeline. Chief among those theories is the return of the Gerudo lad himself, Ganondorf, whose actions pretty much kick-started the giant chasm in this timeline. How this ties into the wider timeline though is anyone's guess at the point I'm writing this, which is about a month away from the release of Tears of the Kingdom. But I'm calling it now. My guess is that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom slot in at the end of the Child Era timeline. Only time will tell though. And that, pals, is the Zelda timeline explained to the best of my ability. I hope you guys enjoyed it and are like me looking forward to Tears of the Kingdom. If you like these gaming timelines, we've got plenty of them on the channel already, including Metroid, God of War and Resident Evil. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.
I just think having 3 timelines is really lazy. There's one timeline with a parallel timeline. You know? There's just one timeline and a mirror. 3 timelines is so, like, why? It seems really silly. So yeah, that's that. That is the explanation of the official timeline. However, my timeline's better because mine makes more sense. So yeah, I feel like I should make a video on a timeline theory. But I'm not very good at putting my words into speech. If that makes sense. My thoughts into words. It's, yeah. The best I can do is write it down and then kind of try to explain what I've written down. But yeah, I'm hungry. I'm not really hungry though. I think I'm okay. Okay, actually, yeah, I'll just be right back. So the story with Outlast Trials is it doesn't work on my computer for some reason. So, yeah, I think I uninstalled it. Yes, time for food. Where is... Oh, here it is. Edit stream info. Yes, we get food. Time to eat food. A reheated crunch wrap. I did it well because I did it on a pan, so now it's extra crispy. Ooh, that sounds yummy, Samurai. What kind of ice cream? We have peaches and cream and Rocky Road ice cream. Both delicious. Wow. Is that fancy Ben and Jerry's one? Yum. I've never tried that. I've always gotten the cookie dough and the pumpkin pie. And I think that's the only ones I've had. That sounds cool. This is actually so good. Like, I don't understand why they don't have breakfast crunch wraps in the afternoon. Because, like, this was just reheated and it tastes just as good as, maybe even better than this morning. And I just reheated it in a pan for just a couple minutes. It's like really good. Oh, Samurai, you're too sweet. This is so good. I have a Kimi cat. She's so cute. Hello. No. The little baby. Kimi, Kimi, Kimi. Yes, you may. Of course. Kimi. Kimi. No. Oh. You're so sweet, little baby. Like, it's too hot for this. No cuddles. Too hot. You're so funny. Okay. I was gonna play Zelda. I'm tired. All we did instead was just watch a really long timeline video and pause a bunch of times. So it's supposed to be 40 minutes long, but instead it took like 2.5 hours. Classic! Streamers have their own time system. Because we can't stop talking, so we just keep pausing it. Whatever it is, games, videos, whatever. No, seriously, that's how it is for like anything. You think it's gonna take like 20 minutes, and then it winds up taking 2 hours. Oh, my back. That's good though. Been wanting it to pop all morning. But yeah, I think I might go entire city. This was fun. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.